Show. I'm Alex Baker, and I'm joined today by Phil Bennetzen. And of course, we're presented by Awesemo.com. Phil, how are you doing today?
Good, and got to say, you guys could literally be watching Rhiannon Lovelace go for the world record Atlas Stone throw right now across the pond. But no, you're watching Fantasy NASCAR Breakdown, so I applaud every one of you guys.
That's a good point, man. There's some good TV going on right now. Also, you could be watching the Bundesliga or maybe even some Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So we've got a lot of action today. But we got two NASCAR races too. I'll mention the trucks race starting in about an hour and the Xfinity race. I have my projections and ownership up for the trucks. So if you want to get some information on those, make sure to go over the website. I'll be posting Xfinity shortly after the trucks race starts. But we're here talking the Cup. We got the Quiktrip 500 tomorrow. And we've been having a lot of NASCAR. And last week we had Bristol. That was kind of different kind of style than the other races we've seen recently because it was a short track. But now we're back to that mid-length track. So what have your thoughts been so far with the few NASCAR races we've had?
The first four races, at the two at the Darlington and then the two at Charlotte, went kind of according to expectations. But I mean, last week at Bristol, you can just throw that out. And a good idea when it comes to these short track races coming up, like, I mean, we've got Martinsville Wednesday night, is that it's probably not a good idea to just hammer ownership in your player pool on a particular guy. Because I mean, if you were like me and you just went hog wild on Ryan Blaney, I mean, yeah, he spun out, but his day ended up ending early because the guy behind him, Ty Dillon, ended up crashing into him because he couldn't get out of his way. And beyond that, trying to nail who the dominators are at these short tracks, it's so tough. So, you know, something that we'll probably talk about in the article for Wednesday night at Martinsville is about, you know, probably spreading out ownership for potential dominators so that, you know, you don't become so centric on one guy, because if you do, then I mean, it'll totally ruin your day. But thankfully, we're not at a short track. We're at good old reliable Atlanta, the benchmark for the intermediate tracks as we know them. We've seen plenty of racing here before. We have good expectations, even though the past three races have all been very different races run under different packages. But we have a pretty good idea of what we should expect for tomorrow. So I'm glad that we have something tangible to grab onto.
Yeah, and this Atlanta track, 1.54 miles, that's almost the same length as Charlotte and Darlington. So if you've been playing all the NASCAR races leading up to this one, you should have a great idea of what to expect here. Now, how does the Atlanta Motor Speedway differ from Charlotte and Darlington when you dig down into more than just the length of the track?
Probably the biggest thing that separates Atlanta from the rest of these cookie cutter mile and a half tracks is its tire wear. In fact, if you watch the truck race today and the Xfinity race later on FS1, and then you come back for the Cup race, the drinking game will be how many times the announcers say tire wear or tire management, because the track is abrasive like sandpaper. I do believe, and I think I highlighted this in my preview article from 3 months ago, that the last time Atlanta was repaved was 1996. So we're talking the Clinton administration was the last time that the track saw a fresh layer of pavement. Now, the track itself has wanted to repave Atlanta several times, but the drivers have begged Atlanta, hey, don't touch the surface. We love the way that this place races. So for another year, they continue to just allow this thing to be the abrasive surface that it really boils down to how well can a driver manage his equipment. Now, we talked about that at Fontana. We talked about that at Darlington, but even more so, it's gonna be on the board for the races today in Cup and in Xfinity and trucks, and then tomorrow in Cup.
Yeah, so tire wear. unfortunately, we don't have practice data, so I can't just tell you to throw all the practice data out the window. But it does seem to benefit the kind of top drivers that have the better funded teams from my observations. So a guy like Martin Truex, we see he doesn't have a lot of top speed usually, but on a track with more tire wear, he may have a better shot than average. But is there any takeaway from the extra tire wear that we can kind of adjust for who we're targeting?
Not really. The best thing to do, and it's like if you've got nothing better to do with your time, then go to Racing Reference, click on the track page, and then go to Atlanta and start scrolling through the final results of these past Atlanta races, and just see who's leading laps, who's finishing up toward the front, who's got the better average running position. And if you've got even more time, you can cross-reference this against what drivers did at Auto Club Speedway, which is a high tire wear track, and then as well as Chicagoland last year. Just try to see who are the guys that are the best at managing their cars as these tires, as the grip falls off throughout these green flag runs.
Nice. So we'll talk about some specific plays in a little bit here. I want to talk about a little bit more about the track in the race, because this one is 500 miles. This isn't a 500-kilometer race like a couple of weeks ago. So this is a really, really long race. It's going to be 3 hours plus, I would say. And that tends to benefit the best drivers, I would say. Is there any other thing we should be looking for other than, the best drivers have even better odds to finish first here?
No, I would, like you said, I'd love to say, hey, let's dig through the practice data, because that'll give us a really good idea of just who is managing their stuff well this weekend. But of course, we don't have it. So
the other feature, 325 laps. That's a little bit more than we saw at Darlington and Charlotte. So a few more Dominator points to go around. The only trouble is I'm seeing that it's going to be very hard to predict who's going to get these points this week. We'll talk about the Dominators in a little bit. But in general, 325, I'd say you want at least 2 of the high-priced Dominators in your lineup. Or are you going for a 2 or 3 Dominator build this week?
Well, on FanDuel, I think it's definitely a dual Dominator build. On DraftKings, you can easily make a dual Dominator build and not have to reach towards the bottom. The mega chalk this week is going to end up being Michael Mcdowell, because he's starting so far back and he's so cheap. But if you go with a dual Dominator build, you don't even have to worry about getting close to Michael Mcdowell and fooling with, well, how much of Mcdowell do I want to be? Do I want to worry about ownership percentage when it comes to this guy? I mean, if you just do a dual Dominator build, I mean, even if we're talking about 2 of the high-priced guys, you really don't have to worry about going down that far. You can do a triple Dominator build depending on how green versus yellow you think this race is going to be, and you will find yourself with Mcdowell because he's the most viable punt down there. But even then, he is literally the only punt that you have to chase after down in that range, and then you're still able to go after guys in the high 6s and the low 7s. So I mean, the 2 versus the 3, it's a good debate, but both are definitely viable and they're both definitely on the board. Just a matter of how you portray, how you foresee this race going down.
Yeah, definitely. For the past week or 2, we haven't seen those cheap guys have that favorable starting position where you can really get a lot of a guy. But Mcdowell starting 36, he's the 7th to last price driver, and he's so much better than the other guys in that tier that he's the obvious pick for tomorrow's race. And maybe we'll find some others when we get into our punt plays segment. So let's jump into the Dominators. The leading odds this weekend are Kevin Harvick, about 5-1 to win. That's about a 16% chance. And that That is a little bit lower than we saw Kyle Busch last week at Bristol, but those are still some pretty favorable odds. The only problem is he's starting ninth, and that's not favorable for getting those laps led in stage one, which is 105 laps out of 330, I think. And I'm not finding him to be very good for the price because he's the most expensive dominator. But how are you feeling about Harvick tomorrow?
Price agnostic. Harvick, without any practice data and just looking at past track results and what he's done in the 550 horsepower package this year, Harvick he matches those betting odds. He is the guy that you would land on to begin your lineups. 134.8 driver rating. That's best out of all these drivers. He's averaging 88.4 FanDuel points and a crazy 115.3 DraftKings points over these past three races. The number that really jumps out to you is his average laps led, 172.7 laps led per race over these last three. Now, his results in the end, they don't always match this. He's only got one victory to show, but he's got a fourth and a ninth place finish. If you told me that I was going to get 170 laps led out of Harvick, that's a slam dunk play. But the problem is, like you said, it's that ninth place starting position. He won't have the number one. He won't have the number one pit stall. Plus, he's got the Penske gaggle in front of him. He's got Chase on the pole. He's got Kyle. He's got Denny and Truex right behind him. So it's not a foregone conclusion that Harvick is going to find his way to the lead. But all things considered, there's a strong possibility that Harvick will find himself in the lead at some point. It's just a matter of how many fast laps led points he gets in the process to pay off that salary.
Yeah, it's a tricky calculus because, of course, he has great odds, but then is he going to get those dominator points? Because the expectations people have, as you mentioned, since he's been doing so well, like maybe a little bit higher than the actual odds that you can bank on. So I have to imagine that if people are looking at the top of the lineup here, and they see that Harvick's averaging 62 points per race, and then everyone else is sub 50. That's an enormous gap, and I think Harvick may pick up some extra ownership because people are looking. They'll just be like, "Oh, I'll lock in the best driver," and I'm a little bit worried about him not being a good value. The guy that I'm really honing in on is Chase Elliott, who's starting at first. Now, starting at first in these 1.5-mile tracks is a big advantage, and he also has the second best odds of anyone in the field to win the race. So this combo is leading me to believe that he's going to lead a ton of laps tomorrow, and he's much cheaper than some of the other top-price guys. So he's like my number one play, I'd say. How are you feeling about Chase?
Yeah, I think that if you don't start a lineup with Chase, then you're probably doing it wrong. Now, the last time that the pole sitter won a race at Charlotte, you have to go all the way back to 2006 with Casey Kane, and I believe, at that time Casey Kane was driving a Dodge, and we don't even have Dodges in the Cup Series anymore. But you don't need a victory from Chase at 9,900. It seems like a pretty good prognostication that you've got Chase starting one, then you've got Eric Almirola starting beside him. That Chase is going to get out front. He's going to take advantage of that clean air. And if you haven't noticed this year in this package, the 550 horsepower package, clean air is definitely king. So as long as Chase can just beat Eric to the punch, and if you saw that the start of the race last week with Brad on the pole and Eric beside him, Brad easily passed Eric out of that first corner. In fact, Eric fell from second to fourth on the very first lap. Expect the same thing here. That Joey, Kyle, maybe even Clint pass Eric in the first 2 laps. Chase takes advantage of the clean air, jumps out, grabs a bunch of these hog points. For the season under this package, Chase is averaging only 27.3 laps led, but Chase has the advantage of being the pole sitter, starting out front, and at 9,900 on DraftKings, that's a really favorable price for him to knock down a bunch of dominator points.
Nice. Yeah, I think he's priced too good. The fact that Almirola is starting next to him doesn't really make you worried that he's not going to lead the laps. And I think that, man, it's going to be hard to fade him. I've been finding I get a lot of the guys that are kind of starting towards the front, like Almirola, as kind of those contrarian plays, because from a projection standpoint, they look pretty poor because Almirola is going to move backwards on average for sure.
Yeah.
But I've been looking into the data here, and I offer my standard deviation on the projections, and Almirola's standard deviation is 24.7. If you compare that to Daniel Suarez, who's $100 more, his is 10. So it's like 2.5 times the amount of variance, and that can make a difference for these races, because you're obviously hoping that every one of your 6 players hits their upside. So would you take any chances on Almirola, or is he just too much of a long shot and odds aren't that great?
As much as I besmirched the great name of Erik Almirola last week, after that initial falling back, Erik did a great job of hanging around and staying up towards the top 5. I mean, he showed that he as a driver and his car was plenty capable. Now the result in the end doesn't show it. He finished 29th because of just the gaggle of wrecks that we had. But yeah, Erik is going to be one of those guys that not a lot of people are going to want to touch because of that second starting position. But crazier things have happened where you've got all these guys that are priced around him that are going to be more popular, like you mentioned with Daniel Suarez, who's got, once again, all the place differential in the world to gain. You've got Erik Jones starting 14th at 6,600. You go up a little bit more. You've got Matty D at 7,200. So Erik's probably going to come in single digits just because people are so scared to touch him in that second position. But you have to believe that it might be a risk worth taking, especially if you like to play the 150 max game.
Nice. That's what I like to hear, because these first prizes are so high, and you gotta really have a lineup that's unique if you want to win it all to yourself. Now, I've been fading some of the more popular combos, which seem to have been working pretty well. But whenever I see that like 15 people tie for first and I'm not one of them, I can't hate that. All right, let's talk about some other dominators. Kyle Busch. It seems like he's been having a rough start to the season, as evidenced by averaging 35.9 fantasy points per race. Now, he had a good week at Bristol last week. So I saw some people starting to doubt Kyle, but I have to imagine that after scoring nearly 100 points last week, people are going to be back in on him. And he has a little bit better starting position at 4th. So do you think Kyle will be part of your core this week, or is he just a little bit too pricey?
Yeah, since I've really got nothing else to go off of right now besides just the past numbers and then what these drivers have done in this package, I'm not overwhelmed by Kyle. His last 3 finishes here, 6th, 7th, and 16th. That's pretty good. His average laps led per race, 3. So Kyle is competitive for fighting for a top 5 finish. But when it comes to actually jumping out front and grabbing laps led here, that doesn't seem to be his forte. And when you look at his average running position over these last 3 races, it's 11.1. Which would kind of tell me that Kyle's finding a way to sneak into the into the top 10 by the end of the race, but he's not really that competitive when it comes to the rest of the race. Yeah, we've got that 11,200, which I mean, it's a lot of points for just 325 laps to pay off. And if we look at what he's done in this package this year, his average laps led in these 6 races running the 550 horsepower package is a big donut, 0. Average running position of 15.1, average finish of 13.2. So right now, honestly, in my 20 max lineups, I don't think I'm going to have any Kyle Busch. Now I could be swayed because he's been snake bit, and probably one of the things that's hurting him is that not having practice data. We've seen this a lot with the Joe Gibbs drivers, is that they really thrive off of having practice data to go off of to improve their cars. So they're basically having to use the first segment almost like practice to get their cars going.
Yeah. So
at Auto Club, another high tire wear racetrack, he finished second. That Wednesday night race at Darlington, he finished second. The Sunday afternoon into night race at Charlotte, a fourth. So I mean, the finishes are there. It's just the lack of fast laps and laps led that concern me, especially at 11,200.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, like, his 35.9 fantasy points per race on the season is pretty astonishing. But as you mentioned, he's got some good finishes in the last few races. I'm kind of looking at these guys starting towards the top: Kyle Busch, Logano, Elliott, and Eric Almirola. And I'm thinking I need to have at least one of these guys in every lineup, because whoever it is that leads the race at the start, most likely Chase Elliott, but it could be one of the other guys. They're going to accumulate a lot of laps led. The other guy is Logano. He's probably the third in line to lead the race towards the start of it, being the third best odds between him, Elliott, and Busch. And also, I mean, he hasn't been quite as fast as the other guys in the recent races. So how does Logano fit into your plans?
Logano, if you are multi-mass entering, you need some Logano shares. He's got the high starting position. It doesn't show up in his past results, but Joey has ran well here. In fact, the whole Penske stable has ran well here. Joey had a really weird qualifying effort last year in this race, along with Brad and Blaney. It was the first time that we had seen the group qualifying, and whatever they attempted to do, it didn't work out well for him. But at the very end of the race, what did you have? You had Joey matriculate his way through the field, and he was leading before he got too aggressive, and he cut down a tire. That's going to be one of the things that you see, is that if you get too aggressive, driving too hard on this track, you will cut down a tire, and you will either find yourself in a car, somebody else's car, or you will find yourself into the wall. So, Joey knows how to get himself to the front. Penske knows what they're doing at this track. I definitely think you need some shares of Joey. And in the same thought, you probably need some shares of Blaney as well. Blaney, found his way to the lead just the same as Joey after starting so poorly. His finishes 22nd, 12th, and 18th. They're definitely not that great, but we know Blaney has definitely been improving as a driver, and with Penske behind him, and just at $8,500. This is the same discussion that we had last week with Bristol. Is just, what do you need from Blaney in order for him to pay off? You don't need him to be the top dominator. Heck, you don't even need him to be the second best dominator. If he just goes out there and leads about 40 to 50 laps, grabs 20 fastest laps in the process, and brings home a fifth place finish, then you're going to be pretty happy with what Blaney does.
Yeah, I'm looking at this mid-range, and Bowman, Blaney, and William Byron really stand out as guys that they can kind of accumulate some points in fastest laps. They have decent outside shots of winning the race. And the prices are just really affordable. So kind of landing on a lot of Bowman and Blaney as good values. And I saw you on Twitter mentioning how underpriced Keselowski is at 8,900. He's been having a lot of success, and I expect that to continue. He's one of my top values of the week. And at 8,900, he's not going to be very difficult to get into your lineup. So are you going to have a lot of Keselowski, or do you think he's just going to be too popular because he's been excelling and he's a really favorably priced?
Yeah, I mean, I keep seeing people say in chat and on Twitter that DraftKings is trying to make lineup construction as user friendly as possible, but it's gotten to the point where it's too easy, where DraftKings is just inviting massive overlap with these lineup builds. That being said, I'm not going to be afraid to jam in a lot of Keselowski in my lineups. I mean, like I said, it's rare that a driver comes into a race with finishes of first, second, and first in the last three races at a track, comes in winning two of the last three races in the series, and what does DraftKings do? Let's lower his price. Now he's 8,900. If you were to say I'm just going to build a dual dominator lineup build with Chase and Brad, you can fit in anybody that you want. I mean, you can literally play around with lineups. Don't have to touch the punts. You can build with a lot of mid-range value. It's almost too easy. Now, what people who play the ownership game do with Brad, that's going to be interesting to see, because probably at his price, I would have to imagine that Brad's going to just be one of the chalkiest players on the board, especially when people have nothing else to do but look at past results.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at his game log, you're going to click his name. That's for sure. He's been killing it the last few races, and he's cheap. So I have to agree. It's like he's a good play, and I have no problem with playing him. But if I'm eyeing this 150K to first on DraftKings, that's when you want to start to take some more chances. And there are other good drivers in that range. Bowman, certainly competitive with Keselowski for who's going to have the higher score. Mm-hmm. And then there's some other guys that we'll get to later that maybe overpriced a little bit, but certainly good drivers. Let's talk about some punts, though. We needed some guys to fit in these dominators into our builds, and you were mentioning Michael Mcdowell. I have to agree. At 5,200, he's just too cheap, starting in 36. Now, if you just look at Vegas odds, he's going to look exactly the same as Quinn Hoof, Garrett Smithley, Brennan Poole, but there couldn't be more difference, because he's a lead lap driver, and these guys finish like 3 or 4 laps behind almost every time. And so what do you think McDowell's chances of being on the lead lap at the end of the race and really making a push for a good DraftKings score are?
Pretty good. Something that I highlighted in the article, and I really hadn't thought about it until I was putting the words down, pen to paper, as they say, is that probably the best thing that happened for Front Row Motorsports, which is who Michael McDowell races for, was addition by subtraction. Last year, they ran McDowell, David Reagan in his final season, and then Matt Tifft for the majority of the season before he had to bow out with health issues, and then they brought in John Hunter Nemechek for I believe the last 5 races. So they ran a 3-car team for a lower mid-tier team unit, and it probably stretched out their resources too much. McDowell had a bad year last year, but now they've contracted back to 2 teams. John Hunter Nemechek is running pretty pretty well. In fact, don't be surprised if he ends up winning the rookie of the year title by the end of the season, because he is consistently running really well. Now he's more than willing to take a risk every now and then, which may hurt him, but he's probably giving the team a lot more useful information for the race than what they were ever getting out of Matt Tifft or David Ragan for that reason. Let's go over McDowell's finishes for the year. You've got 14th at Daytona, and then a 36th at Las Vegas, 22nd at Auto Club, 16th at Phoenix, 23rd and 17th at Darlington, 18th and 25th at Charlotte, and then 14th last week. For a $5,200 price driver on DraftKings, $4,000 on FanDuel, those are not the results that we typically see of that price driver. McDowell should be closer to the $6,000 mark, if not higher. He should probably be rolling around the range of Ty Dillon and Ryan Preece for what he's been doing. But McDowell's where he's at for whatever reason on both sides, and he's just the no nonsense play.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the thing is, place differential is a lot easier to predict than dominator points. So the odds, if McDowell finishes this race, I'll make that caveat, because there's a decent chance he does not, being a lower funded team. But he is a lot better than the other guys in this range. And a lot of times you just need the guy that has the best score that makes the salaries work with the rest of your lineup. So I have McDowell's floor is 26, which is due to his good speed and the possibility to place differential. That's higher than the ceiling score of anyone up to John Hunter Nemechek. So like his 25th percentile performance, McDowell's, is higher than anyone else's 75th percentile. So you can really bank on McDowell this weekend. I'm sure he'll be a staple in my lineups. Now, the other punts, I'd say you got to go up a little bit. You got to go to guys like Cole Custer. I'd say he's probably one of the top ones at 6,100.
Right.
And then Erik Jones, inexplicably 6,600. Like, what happened there? It's hard to call him a punt because he's starting in 14th, but the price definitely makes it seem like one. He's cheaper than Daniel Suarez even. What happened?
That is the confusing thing. Is like, I get what DraftKings was doing with Eric Almirola, with him starting second, and them just saying, okay, let's just make him so cheap that people get tempted to play him. But you've got Erik Jones, who was cheap last week. I think he was $7,000 at Bristol last week, but now he starts 14th at a track that he's had pretty good results at. In his 3 years in Cup, he's gone 14th in 2017, 11th in 2018, and then a 7th place finish last year. So his results continue to get better. Now he's starting 14th, so there's not a lot of place differential, but it's that salary. What exactly do you need out of him for 6,600 for him to be a good cash play or a good tournament play? He's more than capable of doing that.
Yeah, he's so cheap. Like, he's 2,000 cheaper than he was a month ago. And if he maintains his starting position, then he's going to have a good enough score for that salary. But he is a little bit more risky than guys like Suarez. Suarez is just way too overpriced, I'd say. But his floor is going to be lower than some other guys because he can move backwards. But I wouldn't anticipate that to be his average performance. No,
I feel like DraftKings is watching our show when they know my ire towards Daniel Suarez, and they're just going to continue to raise his price just to see the vein on my neck expand each week. Because there is no reason why a Gaunt Brothers 96 car should be $6,900. I don't care that he starts 37th. I don't care that he wildly surpassed expectations at Bristol last week. That was purely just him surviving through attrition and making his way through the field. That happened with a bunch of drivers that you normally would not trust Yeah, $6,900 for Daniel Suarez. That is a definitely a no go.
Yeah, I mean, I have the 4 races before Bristol in my spreadsheet here, and Daniel Suarez on those 4 was slower on average than Michael McDowell. So that pretty much sums up how I'm feeling about Daniel Suarez. Is like, there's no reason you want to go to him. It seems like they're carrying over his price tag from when he had a better team last year. But other than that, I can't really think of any reason. The other guy I'd say is a good value at the low salaries is Cole Custer. He's starting 31st. He 250 to 1 to win, which is the best of any driver up to his salary. And I can't really think of any reason why I wouldn't want to have him. He's got that place differential. He's a decent speed on average. So the only thing is he might not be as good a play as McDowell. How are you feeling about Custer?
Yeah, like if the last guy on your lineup and you've got 60, 64, $6,500 left, and you're debating between Dillon, Priest, and Custer, just take the better guy and the better equipment with the more place differential to gain. You're talking about Germain Racing versus JTG Doherty versus Stuart Haas, and you're getting Custer 6,100, 31st starting position. His average finishing position in this package so far is 20.2. Ryan Priest's is 28.8. So I mean, I think you're getting more upside and more safety for a cheaper price with Custer versus Priest. Dillon's kind of it might be a wash, but I think it's still in that instance, take the guy that offers you more place differential.
For sure, yeah. I mean, those are basically bonus points. So if all things are equal, then you want to go for that guy for sure. Custer has the best starting position at 31st, so makes sense. Now, let's talk about FanDuel punts, because it's interesting at FanDuel where you don't even need to really punt, I would say, on your average week, because everyone's so cheap. But how have you been approaching your FanDuel builds? Is there a certain threshold that you don't really go below? Because sometimes I have drivers that are like 2K.
Right. Yeah, like you said, I really haven't had to mess with that range. Like sometimes the cheapest that I've had to go is in the 5K range, and in weeks prior I've been able to get, let's go back to the Wednesday night, I believe it was the Wednesday night Charlotte race where Bubba, even though he killed everybody, he was starting way back in the 30s, but he was still only 5K. I mean, it made all the sense in the world to go with Bubba. And this week on FanDuel, if you don't have to go down to the 4K, 3K range, Custer's 5,500, McDowell's only 4K. So I mean, you don't have a reason to go to a worse play in that 4K range off of McDowell unless you're just purely wanting to get away from ownership. But then again, I don't know just how many people are going to find themselves in the 3, 4, 5K range on FanDuel, doing just a dual dominator build.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting on FanDuel. Now on FanDuel, Daniel Suarez is 4K, so that actually seems about where he should be. What I've been doing for FanDuel is I have on my projections now, which you can get on Awesemo.com, I subtracted all the points for finishing laps, because if you're going to win a tournament, you got to need them to finish the race, basically.
Right.
So I took that out, and then also I noticed that this recently FanDuel removed fastest laps from the equation. So really dominator points are a very small percentage. You only get 0.1 per laps led. So going to these placement differential guys does make a lot of sense. Now, all right, so we got all these lower price guys are showing up as pretty low projection when you subtract the lap sled. But Daniel Suarez at 4K, that's kind of who I'm gravitating towards. That's higher than anyone up to 7K. So would you be more willing to take a shot at Suarez on FanDuel?
I would, but it's going to be tough for me to say, do I like Suarez and his equipment better than McDowell and his equipment at the same price? I think I can project McDowell for a higher finish than Suarez. So, I'll always run 150 on FanDuel in the nickel entry just because it's, we're talking about $7.50 for 150 entries. That lets you learn how to multi-mass in or playing with Fantasy Cruncher or whatever optimizer that you use. So, eventually you're probably going to run out of combinations that you can use in McDowell, and then the easy pivot will just seeing the optimizer go from McDowell to Suarez. So on the lineups that I hand build, if I have to go to 4K, and I was wondering about this myself, if you took the two most expensive guys on FanDuel, Harvick and Kyle Busch, 14K and 13.5, you're still left with an average of 7,500. So it's not like you really have to go down there, but if you did and you just decided, okay, well, let's throw in Suarez at 4K, then that bumps you up all the way to 92.50, where you do get better access to the guys with the higher finishing position potential.
Yeah, so I agree. It's like interesting because you don't necessarily need McDowell or Suarez, but they do open the door to some pretty stacked lineups. But I do think that let's see, Bubba Wallace has been kind of a staple on FanDuel, but it looks like this week not as good a starting position. I was having some problems with my spreadsheet here. So okay, Bubba Wallace 5K though, and he's significantly better funded than some of like McDowell and Suarez. Pretty decent results so far. And I have to think that Bubba Wallace is a good narrative play because he's been in the news a lot recently. Of course, the only African-American driver. He's trying to get all the other drivers to kind of take a stand on some current events. So I wonder if that will kind of put him in the public group think, I guess I would say. But at 5K, I'm not even worried about that. He's just a little bit too cheap. So how are you feeling about Bubba Wallace?
Yeah, on DraftKings at 7,700, that's a complete no-go for me on Bubba. Yeah, he's still reflecting his price from when he was starting in the rear last week at Bristol, and now he's lost 14, 15 place differential spots. The same argument can be made for Christopher Bell, but at least Bell starting 27th while Bubba starting 23rd. On the surface for 5K, one thing when it comes to FanDuel is if I have 1,000 or 2,000 left, I don't sweat it, because sometimes you will build lineups that you like with that much money left over versus DraftKings, where if you have $1,000 or $2,000 left over, it better be a plate race, or else you need to start adjusting things. So if I'm at $5,000 left and my options are Bubba starting 23rd, if I can and I can't get up to Cole Custer at 5,500, I'll probably just go down instead to Ty Dillon starting 28th, who has a little more place differential, who I feel just a tad safer with. In this package, Bubba's average finish is 24.3, while his average running position is 23.1. And at the last two races that were run in this package, he wrecked out both times, 38th and 37th. So I don't feel that's safe with Bubba. I would rather find a way to go up or go down.
Nice. All right. So we've talked about kind of the punt plays. It was interesting on FanDuel how some of the guys that are pretty expensive on DraftKings are cheap on FanDuel, and I always like that because it lets you differentiate a little bit more between your lineups, so that if you do poorly on one side, you're more likely to do better on another. Now, let's talk about some of the guys that we might have skipped over, and the most obvious, I'd say, are Denny Hamlin and Jimmy Johnson. Now, they're starting 10th and 15th, so pretty suboptimal starting positions. And you're paying more for Hamlin and Johnson than you are for like Martin Truex Jr., which makes no sense to me. So would there be any reason why you might go for Jimmy Johnson or Hamlin? Because they seem a little bit too pricey this week.
Yeah, I mean, I get where Jimmy is at because of where he was at last week. Like, there doesn't seem to be that much movement from player salaries carrying over from Bristol to this week on DraftKings end. But it's hard to put my finger on it with Johnson. Like, if you look at his last three finishes here at Atlanta, they are not impressive. We're talking 24th, 27th, and 19th. Wasn't on the lead lap on any of those finishes, but Atlanta, just over a course of time, has been one of Jimmy's better tracks. In fact, before those past three bad finishes, he won back-to-back races here at Atlanta. Now, where Jimmy's at 4 to 5 years ago versus where he's at now, that's a bit of a different picture. But at 10,200, you need more than just Jimmy picking up 10 place differential spots. I mean, you are going to definitely need some dominator points to figure into this decision. When you look at what Jimmy's done in this package thus far this season, average finish of 11.8, average running position of 13.6. He does have 2 top 5s and 4 top 10s in the 6 races, but I not only do I need a top 5 out of Jimmy to pay off 10,200 on DraftKings, I'm going to need him to probably knock down a bunch of fastest laps in his way of getting to the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one's pretty simple for me. The game log exceeds kind of what you should expect from Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah.
So I think he'll be around. Now, Denny Hamlin seems to be overpriced too because he's priced. His odds are probably like 8th or 9th best or 8th best, but he's priced as the 3rd most expensive driver. So that's someone I'm going to cross off the list as far as a cash game play, certainly. But in GPP, if he wins the race, I mean, he's going to be in the winning lineup, I'm sure. Now, his game log is a little uglier, so he might not be super popular. Is he a contrarian play, or do you think that people will be on him still?
Yeah, I think that he's definitely a sprinkle guy. I mean, the last time that Denny won at Atlanta, we were talking 2012. So that, that's the Generation 5 car, not the Generation 6 car that we've been running. His last 3 finishes: 11th, 4th, 38th. Of course, that 38th finish, he was a DNF. The game log, it's not looking like anything that I want to go after, especially at 10,800. But then again, I wasn't that high on Denny last week at Bristol, and Denny ended up leading over 100 laps. And he wasn't going to win that race because he got caught by Chase and Joey, and then Joey ended up cutting down Denny's tire when he was going around him. But still, if Denny doesn't get his tire cut down, maybe I'm feeling a little bit different about Denny thus far. Let me look at what Denny's done so far this year. Yeah, in this package, 6 races, he's got to win that evening race at Darlington. But I don't want to try to make apples to apples comparisons about an evening, 200 lap evening race at Darlington that was delayed by rain versus a 325 lap, afternoon race at Atlanta.
Yeah, kind of interesting option, but he's priced a lot more than some of the other comparable ones. So like Martin Truex Jr., he's only 9,600. He seems to be like continually priced way below, his history. Now, last week he wasn't very popular because I'm not exactly sure why he was a little bit lower on than I expected. But
I think there's people just looking at his past history at Bristol, which wasn't that fantastic.
Okay. So now that we're back to the mid-length track, he's had good results the past few races, but not exceptional. So I got to think that he makes a nice value play if you want to maybe fade a Harvick or a Kyle Busch. Do you think you're going to have a lot of Truex because of the price?
Yeah, Truex last three finishes, 2nd, 5th, and 8th. Truex led a good amount of laps last year before Brad ultimately won. Martin has been really good in the mile and a half tracks. He's run well in these tire management races. And at 9,600, I mean, that is a $1,000 to $2,000 discount on where Truex should probably be. His numbers year to date, they don't look that impressive, but we've talked about this before. He's been a victim of circumstance, kind of like what happened last week with his finish at Bristol. Truex, I have to imagine will come in under owned because he's in a weird starting spot and he's in a weird salary range. But he's another one of those guys that if you go with three dominators that are all 10,000 or cheaper, you still have plenty of salary cap left to go with a value based lineup with your last three guys.
Yeah, Truex, he's going to make your lineup look real nice because you're saving a bunch of money for that number one guy. Now, I'm going down the list here. A lot of unappealing options, like Tyler Reddick, for some reason, is priced more than William Byron now. I have no idea what the deal is there. Kenseth as well seems to be a little bit overpriced for his chances. But Tyler Reddick, he's been having an impressive season so far, probably exceeding expectations. Is there any reason to go to him, or is it just kind of that middle ground where not enough place differential or dominator upside?
I think that a lot of people are going to end up on Tyler, and it's just because they've got so much salary cap to play with. I would imagine in cash games, you're going to see a bunch of Tyler in your head-to-heads and single entry double ups because it's going to be a base dual dominator build. And then you're going to find yourself in the 8K range with the rest of your guys. And, if you're the typical player, you're just looking at salary on the right and then to the left of it where their starting position is. And you're saying, oh, okay, Tyler Reddick, yeah, he's been pretty good this year. Yeah, he's a little overpriced at 8,300, but he's starting 24th. So, I mean, that's a fair amount of place differential to gain. So why not?
That's a good point. Yeah. When you put it like that, I almost want to click it myself.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now we get into some kind of long shot plays. Christopher Bell, 7,400. I liked him a lot when he was a place differential play that was cheap. Now he's not cheap, so that's off my list. Matt Dibenedetto, 21st, is more appealing, I'd say. He has a better shot to win, has been faster, and he's starting 21st. So between those two guys, if I landed there, I'd pick Dibenedetto. But which way would you lean?
I think I would side with Bell, even though he's just a little bit more expensive on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you're getting a $2,000 discount, which in fact, it's almost $3,000 discount, which you can't ignore. But Bell, the 6 extra spots, and in the Xfinity race at Atlanta last year, Bell just ran away with this race. I mean, it wasn't even close. I remember being in the car listening to that race, and I mean, it was like Bell never left the lead. Even when he pitted, he still remained in the lead. Bell knows how to get around this track. His results have been getting better and better. Probably the best thing that happened for him was the break due to COVID-19, because ever since then his results have taken the dramatic upward turn compared to where they were before the break. So, I want to ride the momentum with Bell, especially when he gives you 6 more place differential spots to gain on DraftKings.
Nice. So definitely some upside there. The price has been going up, so I'm a little less excited about picking him this week. Stenhouse, he seems to be a guy that is everyone's favorite to talk about on Twitter. Now his price is a little bit lower than the upside at 7,600, but we all know the downside. He hasn't finished several races in the past few weeks. I'm not probably going to click him a ton, but how do you feel about Stenhouse?
Yeah, it's that combination of, I feel like he's overpriced. Plus, you're getting a guy that when he was in better equipment, his finishes were pretty middling, 18th, 16th, and 13th over the last couple of years. Now he's in worse equipment. We know how aggressive Ricky is, and aggressiveness at Atlanta they're like oil and water. They're two things that don't mix well.
Yeah. And we've seen that mix a few times so far.
Right.
Austin Dillon, that was a guy that you were big on 1 or 2 races ago. But now he's starting 16th, so he's not really a place differential guy. Does that mean you're off him?
If it wasn't Atlanta, I might still be on him because he's still, starting 16th and at 6,400, he gives you upside for tournaments, but this has not been his track. I don't know if it's, a combination of Austin not being patient. I know one of the things that hurt him last year was starting way too far forward. The Childress cars would always set their cars up for qualifying and then end up falling throughout the race. But Austin is having a better year this year. Let me scroll over to what he's done so far this year. Yeah, if you look, and he's kind of like Bell. If you look at what he's done since they've came back from the break, 11th, 20th, 14th, 8th, and 6th. I mean, those are not results that we typically get out of Austin Dillon in the 3. So could Austin find his way to another top 10 finish through attrition and just kind of maintaining his equipment? Yeah, I could definitely see it. But the problem is that just below him, you've got Dillon, Priest, and Custer, who could easily outscore him because of their place differential.
For sure, yeah, I agree. My favorite of those is Custer. Now, if you go below Custer, we have Mcdowell, of course, but besides that, I mean, there's like 15 or 12 guys in this range, and I can't really think of anyone I'd play other than Mcdowell. The only one that's coming close is Brennan Poole, just because he's 4,900. He is better than some of these other guys in the last tier as far as speed on average, being closer to a lead lap car. How about you? Do you see any diamonds in the rough in this bottom range?
God. Possibly, and it's a big, fat, ugly possibly, looking at Reed Sorensen because he's starting dead last and he's 5,500. So, I mean, he can go forward, and you can make the same arguments for Hill and McLeod. But, God, I mean, if you give me these options versus McDowell, I don't care if I've got 100% McDowell in 20 lineups. I'm just gonna take Michael.
Man, this week is setting up to be really interesting because the chalk guys like McDowell, Chase Elliott, Keselowski, these guys are really good plays. And then you have on the other end of the spectrum about 15 guys that like you barely want to touch. So I have a feeling this week's it's gonna be hard to build a lineup that's really unique. And I might just settle for a lineup that's more likely to time. But how are you approaching this week in general? Because there are so many have dead spots in the lineup.
Yeah, it's really had me debating whether I want to go 20 max or if I just want to build build 3 because I'm anticipating so much overlap in these ownership numbers. DraftKings has made it way too easy to build a lineup this week, and easy lineups get duplicated. There's probably going to be a bunch of duplicated lineups. It might be a good week to not get in the big field double ups. Like if you do the 20 max $1 double up on DraftKings, or the other multi-entry double ups that they allow, it might be a good week to just sit those out and find the single entry double ups, or just play a bunch of head to heads, hoping that you can catch some people in there that aren't, in this echo chamber of the NASCAR DFS industry, who aren't watching videos, who aren't listening to podcasts, who aren't reading articles, who are just looking at the starting grid and building lineups from that, or whatever little information that they get. Because when you put that many people together in these big multi-entry double ups, the majority of them are using the same information, and they're probably going to have the same lineups. It's going to be an issue like we had at Phoenix, where so many people are using the same lineup, where you're going to play $20 and your lineup's going to cash, but you're going to end up making 16.
Well, that is obviously something that we'd hate to see, but definitely a possibility, because it's so obvious what the optimal, like at least 4 of the optimal 6 are pretty easy to just pick out of the lineup. Now, that does open the door to maybe playing some guys that are longer shots. And my general advice is you want to do that with dominators and not with place differential guys, because place differential is a lot easier to bank on. So if you're trying to be cute by fading Mcdowell and going to Quinn Hoof, I mean, that is not something I'd recommend. But it should be a great race tomorrow. Phil, any final thoughts for our audience here?
Yeah. One, it might be a good idea to just take your DraftKings bankroll that you're gonna play for tomorrow and take it to FanDuel, where I expect a lot less overlap. Go play there. Especially a lot of you DraftKings guys do not play FanDuel because you've tried taking your DraftKings process and applying it to FanDuel and ended up with bad results, and you couldn't figure out what the problem was. Go read the DFS 101 article. Figure out what you need to do differently. The second thing is, you may, in order to get that true differentiation tomorrow on DraftKings, you may have to just build some downright weird and ugly lineups. Like you may have to get weird with some Eric Almirola instead of playing the chalkier Erik Jones. You may have to play Chris Buescher at 5,900 instead of playing Cole Custer or Ty Dillon. You're going to have to find some ways to get some differentiation to get away from this chalk. And when you look at those lineups, they're probably going to make you sick to your stomach because you feel like you're already lighting that money on fire. But you're going to have to do weird things tomorrow in order to have unique lineups.
Definitely. If you're looking at your lineup and you're like, I like every single driver in this lineup, it's going to be the same lineup as everyone else. So That's something to watch out for. If you do want to play like more conventional, then play smaller field tournaments maybe. It should be interesting to see how this all shakes out, because these are big tournaments on DraftKings. 76,000 people on DraftKings and 119,000 on FanDuel. FanDuel went really big, so it'll be exciting to see how it plays out. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. On the way out, make sure to click the thumbs up button. That helps us a lot. Bill, thanks a lot for all the advice for tomorrow's race, and everyone, good luck, and hope this race is a good one.
Good luck, guys. Thank you.